Let me start with a question that might make you raise an eyebrow. How much money do you think the average person actually retires with? Don't overthink it. Just go with your gut. $1 million? A few lakhs? Nothing at all. If you asked 10 people on the street, you'd probably get 10 completely different answers. Some guess high because they've heard you need $1 million to retire repeated everywhere. Others guess painfully low because all they see are headlines about people struggling with money. But almost no one gives the real number. Not the story, not the myth, the number backed by actual data. And that's exactly what we're breaking down today. Before we jump in, make sure to hit like so this video reaches more people who need to hear this. All right, let's start with something simple. Most Americans retire at around 62. Not 65, not 67, not 70, 62. That's the earliest age you can start collecting Social Security, though at a reduced benefit. A lot of people think early retirement means beaches and margaritas. In reality, many people step out of the workforce at 62 not because they're ready, but because life pushes them. Maybe their body can't handle the physical toll of their job anymore. Maybe they got laid off. Maybe they spent years taking care of a parent or spouse. Or maybe they're just exhausted after 40 years of grinding. Whatever the reason, 62 is the moment where savings stop growing from new income and finally get tested by reality. And that brings us to the question everyone wants answered. How much does the average household actually have saved by the time they hit 62? Here's the truth, straight from Federal Reserve data. The typical household near retirement has about $185,000 to $200,000 in retirement accounts. That's it. And this number only includes actual retirement vehicles, 401ks, IRAs, pensions, and similar accounts. We're not talking about home value, business value, savings accounts, or whatever cash someone has hidden under the mattress. This is strictly the money meant to support retirement. Now, $200,000 sounds better than zero, and for millions of people with nothing saved, it's a lot. But when you spread it across 20 to 30 years of retirement, that money stretches thinner than a t-shirt from the discount bin. But let's zoom out. What about total household wealth? That number is higher. Households around 62 typically have about $400,000 in total net worth. Sounds much more encouraging, right? Except, most of that isn't usable. Because about half of that wealth is tied up in home equity, the walls, roof, flooring, and foundation of a house. You can't go to the grocery store and hand them part of your kitchen countertop for milk and eggs, unless they start accepting drywall as legal tender, which sadly, they don't. Yes, people can sell and downsize. They can take a reverse mortgage, but most people don't. And even those options come with complications, so the money stays locked inside the house. So in real usable terms, most people retire with roughly $200,000 in actual retirement savings and another $200,000 in assets that don't directly help them pay bills. Which leads to the big question, why are these numbers so low? When you consider how much money flows through a household over 40 years of working, it doesn't add up. You'd think people would retire with far more than this. But there isn't one single reason. There's a perfect storm of reasons. First, most people never actually learn how investing works. No one sits them down and explains compounding. No one shows them how the earlier dollars do the heavy lifting. So instead of feeling confident, they feel lost. And when something feels complicated, most people simply avoid it. Second, people hear horror stories. Maybe their uncle swears off the market because he lost half his 401k in 2008. Maybe a friend lost money in the dot-com crash. When those are the stories you grow up hearing, the stock market feels like a casino instead of a tool. Third, there's the safe feeling that comes with cash. Cash looks stable. It doesn't go up and down like a roller coaster. But while it sits calmly in a bank account, inflation quietly eats at it year after year. A number that stays the same on paper can shrink in real life without making a sound. Fourth, life is expensive, And most people choose today over tomorrow. It's easier to grab takeout, upgrade the phone, book a trip, buy a nicer car, or renovate the bathroom. Retirement feels far away until it's not. Before they know it, they're 55, wondering where the time went and wishing they had started earlier. And finally, the biggest reason of all, people simply don't save enough. The national savings rate sits around 5%. That's across all forms of saving, not just retirement. 5% isn't enough to build a future. When so little gets saved and even less gets invested, people reach their 60s realizing they're way behind. Now let's break down what $200,000 actually means once someone retires. If you follow the commonly recommended 4% withdrawal rule, a slow and steady approach meant to make your money last, you're looking at about $8,000 per year. That's roughly $666 per month. That's not rent money in many places. If you go more aggressive, similar to what Dave Ramsey talks about, assuming heavy stock exposure and higher expected returns, maybe you can pull out around $16,000 per year, or $1,333 per month. Still not enough to live on. So where does the rest come from? Social Security. A typical Social Security benefit is about $2,000 per month per person. So a married couple might receive around $4,000 monthly. Add in the $600 to $1,300 from their retirement accounts, and the total usually lands somewhere around $4,700 to $5,300 per month. Not luxury, not poverty, just somewhere in the middle, exactly where most people land. But here's the part that surprises people. It takes shockingly little to reach $200,000. If someone invests just $120 a month, about $4 a day, into an S&P 500 index fund from age 30 to 65, they'll end up with around $200,000. That's it. That's all it takes to match the average retirement savings. So why don't people hit that number earlier? Because most don't invest consistently. They throw small amounts into retirement accounts after spending on everything else. Or worse, they wait until their mid-50s to start taking it seriously. By then, the compounding magic that works so well in your 20s, 30s, and 40s has far less time to do its thing. But here's the interesting part. The bar to beat the average is incredibly low. If the typical household retires with about $200,000, beating that just requires slightly more consistency. Someone who invests $300 a month might walk away with around $500,000. Someone who invests $500 a month could hit $800,000 or more. And none of this requires extreme sacrifices. It just requires sticking with a plan. Now, let's talk about one of the most overlooked opportunities in retirement: time. Let's say someone reaches 62 with $200,000. Instead of tapping into that money immediately, they keep it invested and rely on Social Security or part-time income for a few years. At a typical S&P 500 average return of 10%, after 5 more years, that $200,000 could grow to over $320,000. After 7 years, it could grow to around $400,000, almost double the original amount. And that's without investing a single extra dollar. This is what compounding does when you give it just a little more room to breathe. Most people think saving for retirement is about being perfect, making huge sacrifices, cutting out everything fun, and becoming some sort of financial monk. But it's not. It's about being consistent and starting early. If you miss the early years, you make up for it with time or slightly larger contributions. The truth is simple. You don't have to be smarter than everyone else. You don't need a 6-figure salary. You don't need the perfect financial plan. You just need consistency. A little invested each month goes further than most people think. So what's the real takeaway from all this? First, the average person isn't retiring with millions. They're retiring with around $200,000 in retirement accounts and $400,000 in total wealth, most of it trapped in home equity. Second, the reason most people retire with less than they hoped has nothing to do with intelligence or bad luck. It's usually a mix of not learning how investing works, sticking with cash because it feels safe, letting fear steer their choices, or prioritizing today over tomorrow. Third, the math to end up ahead isn't complicated. Small, regular investments, started early and kept going, can completely change your future. And finally, remember this. Your future self is counting on you to take this seriously, not in a panic-filled way, but in a calm, steady way, a way that says, I'll do a little today so tomorrow is easier. Because the people who retire comfortably aren't the ones who made giant leaps. They're the ones who made small, consistent steps. So the real question is, what step can you take today that your future self will thank you for?